Good morning, good afternoon, good evening internet, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Economical Rides. Hi there, as you may or may not know, I've had Norman, my 2023 Royal Enfield Himalayan, for about 4 months now, and we've done about 1,000 miles together. And I promised to do a 1,000-mile first impressions review. So this isn't a full review, this is just after 1,000 miles. My opinion may change, or it may not. In my experience, if you do 1,000 miles on a bike, you normally know everything about it. But anyway, it's not going to be an in-depth review because there are plenty of those on the internet. This is just an owner's review, and an owner who has owned a Classic 350 and also owns a Meteor 350. So I probably will draw some comparisons between this bike and those bikes. So basically, I bought Norman because I wanted to explore some trails, one of which we are on today. And yeah, I've had mixed success with that. Oh! But don't worry, I'm sure that Norman is very much more capable off-road than I am. That's what I got him for predominantly. But the surprising thing is actually just how much fun this bike is on the road. I was reminded of that coming up here. It's a nice twisty mountain road to get here. And yeah, he handles really well on the road. You can push on a bit. And yeah, that was one big surprise. I actually enjoy riding Norman a lot more on the road than I was expecting to. He's turning out to be a very versatile machine indeed. Because I have the adventure spec with the panniers fitted, he's very good for running errands. Since I've had Norman, I've stopped using my scooter to run errands. I usually just take the Himalayan, do a little bit of emergency shopping, go to the bank or the post office. I just hop on Norman. So he gets a lot more use than I was anticipating. I've had Norman for 4 months. In that time I have done a couple of mods, nothing major. I like to keep my bike standard as much as possible, so I'll just show you those mods. So first of all, I fitted a side stand foot extender because when I park on loose surfaces I find that the OEM side stand tends to sink in quite a bit, and it leaves me with a fairly wobbly position on the bike. I'm not happy in a strong wind, it could possibly blow over. So we've got the side stand foot extender fitted. So another little mod I've done is I have the Givi screen extender because I found that with the standard screen it was putting turbulence right on top of my helmet, which made recording video and audio on the bike a bit tricky. So I've added this screen extender. And thanks to Dino and the crew in Malta, it no longer wobbles about as much as it used to. Regular viewers will know it did used to wobble about a fair bit. According to Dino, you have to have more overlap between the screen extender and the original screen to stop that from happening, because if there is a gap, air gets in there and it generates a weird kind of turbulence which results in everything wobbling about. So that wobbles a lot less now, so that's good, and it definitely keeps the turbulence off my head. So I'm about 5'7", 5'8", and I have a 30-inch inside leg, and when I was sat on the bike with the OEM screen, I did find that the turbulence was going right into the visor area of my helmet. So that's the screen extender has helped solve that problem. So let's just cover a few little areas of the bike like I normally do in my reviews. The brakes, they're kind of typical Royal Enfield. They get the job done. They will stop you if you pull them hard enough. They don't have a ton of bite. Probably on a bike like this, on going downhill on a loose surface, that's actually to your advantage that they don't have too much bite. But yeah, that seems fairly typical with all of the Royal Enfield bikes. People say that the brakes feel a little bit dead. But they do work, so that's typical Royal Enfield fare on the braking front. With regard to the handling, as I've said, I really enjoy this bike on the road. I wasn't expecting to. On a mountain road, it's great fun to hustle it along. I did have in 1994, I did buy a brand new Honda Transalp, and that had a 21-inch front wheel as well. And I sold that within a year. and I made a huge loss on it because I couldn't get on with the 21-inch front wheel. On that bike, I had no feel whatsoever as to what the front wheel was doing. It always felt like if I got onto the side of the tyre, I was going to low side. So that bike scared me to death, particularly in the wet, because it gave me no feedback through the front. So I did fear that it might be the similar situation here with the Himalayan with its 21-inch front wheel, but it's absolutely not. The feel I get from this bike is spot on. You can really push it on with confidence. You know exactly what the front's doing. So I was very impressed by the handling. I wasn't expecting it to be that good, but it really is. Obviously, with this tall suspension, if you push on too much, the whole thing does start to get a bit bouncy, but that's just the bike letting you know, playtime's over, that's far enough, don't overdo things. So it's nice to just ride it, push it on a little bit until you get to that point where it's doing this, and then you know, okay, that's fast enough. So yeah, I really do enjoy hustling it through mountain bends. It's great fun. Off-road, I haven't been able to do a lot because I've only had, I think it was 2 months before the off-road summer ban came into force here. So I can ride again in October off-road in the forests. But in those couple of months, I did have a couple of nice rides, but I can't really say how competent the bike is off-road because A, I'm incompetent, as you can see here. Man down, man down. I think it's safe to say that didn't go well. And B, I haven't really had enough experience with the bike yet, so I can only say that based on everyone else's reviews and people that actually do use these bikes seriously off-road, I suspect it is very capable. Currently it's definitely going to be more capable than I am off-road. So off-road it's definitely going to be a decent bike, I think, but I can't say too much about that because I'm not really qualified. But that's what I bought it for, and so far it's been better than I've been, and I look forward to using it a lot more off-road once the autumn arrives. So yeah, off-road and on-road, it's been fantastic. Just so good, just so good all round. With the cases on it, it's really super practical. Like I say, it's more or less replaced my scooter. My scooter doesn't get any use now because I just take this out. So overall, really happy with it. The engine, yeah, well, let's talk about the engine and gearbox because I come from recent experience with the J series engine, so the 350 engines, and you definitely notice on this bike the gearbox is clunkier. It's not as smooth as on the J series, but that's understandable really. That's fine, and it is getting better actually. The more miles the bike gets on it, it's getting better, but initially it needed a good old shove to change gears, but it is loosening up a bit. The engine, well, the engine is, yeah, it's kind of what lets this bike down a little bit. This engine lacks character. It lacks character in its sound. This is what it sounds like. And also, the engine lacks character in its power delivery. Now, it doesn't really feel like it has the bottom end bias that the J series engine has. The J series engine really encourages you to shift up early. It really wants to pull from low down. This engine feels a little bit more like it needs revs. It wants revs. I was surprised. I was expecting it, especially with it being slightly bigger capacity, to feel much stronger down low, but it actually feels all the time like it's not really happy at the bottom of the rev range. It wants to be up towards the middle. So I was a little bit surprised by that, and I think it does end up giving the bike a fairly bland character. I think if they did a 411 version of the J series engine, this bike would instantly get a lot more character. You'd get a decent sound out of it, and you'd have more of a bottom end biased power delivery, I suspect. So the engine's disappointed me slightly. It's functional, it does its job, but this bike, as a result of that engine, I feel doesn't have a lot of personality. It's not like the other Royal Enfields I've owned. This one is kind of bland, so that's why I call it beige. Right, so let's talk about my ownership experience of the bike. Well, I've had a couple of issues, nothing too major. I've had the rear brake lever, the nut behind the rear brake lever, work loose. So when I was washing the bike one day, I did notice that the brake lever was about to fall off. So I had to tighten that up. And the only other little issue I've had is I had one fork gaiter which kept coming off the fork. So in the end, I've ended up fitting these rather day-glow cable ties to keep the fork gaiters on the fork, because obviously they need to be on the fork, otherwise they're not stopping the dirt from getting in there. So yeah, I had a fork gaiter on one side that kept coming adrift for some reason. One thing about this bike, when you compare it, for example, to the modern bikes, the 350s for instance, you can see that the build quality is not as good, and I believe they're made in a different factory as well, so they don't have the same quality of fit and finish. Some of the welds on here are hideous. I mean, I'll just show you some of the worst ones. As long as the weld holds, I suppose it's a good weld. It doesn't really have to be pretty. I had all of the little protective silicone socks for all of the connectors. They were all half on, half off when the bike arrived, so I had to put them into the right position to keep all of the electrical connectors out of the wet. So that was a little, I don't know, just like a lack of attention to detail, I would say, on these bikes. So when you see that, you think, well, it's clearly going to be a workhorse. As a utilitarian bike, it's not designed to look sexy. It's just there to do a job. So I find that kind of liberating. The fact that it does look like it was kind of nailed together, makes me think that it's just there to be used, there to be ridden, and I don't feel too precious about it, obviously, because I've dropped it a couple of times already. So definitely the build quality, if you're expecting J series bike levels of build quality and finish, you'll be disappointed. That's definitely not the case with these bikes. It's the same with the Scrams. They have the same kind of pigeon poop welding all over them. So that's just something to be aware of. My original plan was, when I bought the Meteor, I was actually saving up to buy a Himalayan. I decided that the Himalayan was the bike for me. I could use it on Sunday rides on the roads, or I could take it down trails. So that was the plan. I was going to buy one bike, it was going to be a Himalayan, and I was saving up for that. And then the Meteor was announced, and I ended up buying the Meteor instead. And I'm actually quite glad that, well, I'm very glad that I bought the Meteor because I love it, but I'm glad that things worked out that I ended up buying the Himalayan as a second bike, because I think if I'd have bought this bike as my single one and only bike, I'm fairly confident that within a year I would have got bored of it, because it doesn't scratch an itch at all, really. It's very bland. It works, it does everything competently, it's super versatile, but it doesn't light a spark in your soul in any way. It's just, yeah, it's beige, I'm sorry, but it is. And so I think it's a cracking second bike, because you can use it for all kinds of jobs, and it just gets on with it and it just does it. And then obviously you can go off-road anytime you like with it. So I think for me, it's a cracking second bike, but as a single bike, the only bike you own, I think you might get tired of it. But it's funny, because I'm pretty confident as well, if you did have one as your only bike and you got tired of it within the first year and you went out and bought something that scratched that itch, that made you feel excited to ride it, I think the Himalayan, because of its qualities, is going to be a bike that you'll regret having sold, and you'll wish you could have kept it as a second bike, because there are so many times when this bike's going to be great to have. Right, so there you go. That's my 1,000-mile summary with this bike so far. I'm enjoying it a lot more on the road than I thought I would. It's become very useful for running errands, so it's been my go-to bike for running errands or doing emergency shopping, because these panniers are so practical and you can get so much in there, and it's all easily locked down, secured. So I do use it more than I was anticipating. Initially I thought it was going to be my off-road bike only, but I use it for all sorts. And as I said, I think it's a great second bike. I would wonder if it would satisfy you for a very long time if it was your only bike. I think you'd soon start to miss the excitement of motorcycling, you'd probably upgrade it for something else a bit more exciting. But as a second bike, it's certainly a really useful thing to have. I call it the Swiss Army knife of bikes, or you know, it's kind of like a Land Rover Defender or something like that. It's just a tool. It does everything pretty competently. It doesn't excel in any one thing, I don't imagine. Obviously for an off-road bike, it's very competent, allegedly, but I think probably its weight is a bit heavy to be a really, really top recommendation for off-roading. But yeah, for sort of trail riding that I do, it's going to be fine, and I enjoy it on the road. So overall, a lovely bike. I'm really glad I bought it, and I think I'm going to have it for quite a long time. But it's not exciting, so it's beige but brilliant. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. If you've got any questions, if you're interested in the Himalayan for yourself, drop a question in the comments down below. I'll be happy to answer, give you my honest opinion. But yeah, that was my 1,000-mile opinion. That may change. We may do a follow-up, who knows. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, found it useful. Click the old thumbs up if you did, that really helps me. And I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Now I'm off home to get Ruby a sausage. So Ruby, that was my 1,000-mile Norman review. And now that I'm back home, and you've been looking after the house for Daddy, it's time for sausages. And these sausages come from Scott and Wolfie. Scott and Wolfie, they're your Pasadena pals, aren't they? Yes, Scott and Wolfie from Pasadena. Sausage. Nice one. Thanks, Scott and Wolfie. Nice one. Sausages.